Hello and welcome to Property Question Time, the show where you get to ask your property-related questions to our trio of industry experts. Let me introduce you to today's guests. So first up, we have Tony Gimple. Now, Tony is founding director of Less Tax for Landlords. Next up, we have Simon Zutshi. Welcome to the show. Founder of Property Investors Network and author of Amazon best-selling Property Magic, which I've read. And also, last but not least, Paul Higgs, director of the Millbank Group. And then also, of course, you're a trainer, a developer, a chartered... I mean, there's too much to write on my card, quite frankly. So, real industry experts. Okay, let's kick off, shall we? I'm going to come to Tony first with a question here that we have from somebody. So this person says, my parents are looking to sign their house over to me and are wondering the best way to go about it without having to pay loads of charges, taxes and fees. Would they be best to sign it over in a transfer of land, title, deeds, or leave it to me in their will? Or is there another way to go about it?
Well, the big question is why they want to do it in the first place.
Right.
Giving your own home to your children is fraught with difficulties. You know, they get married, they get divorced, they go bankrupt, they own the home. So you're effectively putting your life into their hands.
Right.
Secondly, yes, you can give them the house, but if you're not paying a market rent, then the transaction effectively is deemed not to have happened for inheritance tax purposes. Okay. And if you're using trust, the income goes into trust, taxed at 45%. So the real answer to the question is, why do you want to do it? And once you've got that, then you can look at the most effective strategy without tying yourself in knots or incurring immediate or long-term tax charges.
Okay, so this is something that I think a lot of people are quite confused about, because it's particularly, am I right in saying that the laws here are more complex when it comes to this, or you certainly give away more tax than in other European countries?
No, the tax environment here is really good.
Okay, on inheritance tax?
Across the board.
Okay.
You know, I mean, inheritance tax is state-sponsored grave robbery. Always has been, always will continue to be so. But as long as you do it properly, the rules can be generous. Okay. You've just got to be careful what you do and how you do it. So, to give an example, you know, if you're giving something away worth more than £325,000, the amount one can give away free of inheritance tax, the excess is potentially subject to an immediate tax charge of 20%, and then 6% every 10 years. Okay. Whereas if you give it away completely, have no interest in it, and survive 7 years, it's disappeared from your estate completely.
But then I suppose that's for really wealthy people, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
For to give away 325 grand and still be all right, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you've got to have the liquidity, of course. Yeah.
If you look at how much property prices have gone up, though, over the last 10 years, actually a lot of people have got a lot more than £325,000 equity in their home. Right. And especially if they're getting older and they paid off their home, they might have a really valuable asset on which they will get taxed when they unfortunately pass away. Okay, all right, well thank you. This is why you have experts like you, because it is such a minefield. Right, Simon, question for you. This is from one of our viewers, and this person says, in 2012 I was in the right place at the right time, and I bought my first flat outright as a cash buy. It's a one-bed flat, a new build, and it's worth about $150,000. Needless to say, I purchased it for considerably less than the valuation as a quick, no-nonsense sale. Now, the flat's currently let out and returning a tidy yield. Tidy. I know that my money isn't working hard enough for me all tied up in the one flat, and I'd like to buy again, maybe a one or possibly two bed. What's the best way to go about releasing some of the funds in the most efficient way? Okay, so you're absolutely right. You know, when you buy something cash, you can get a really good price, but leaving that money stuck in one property really is not a good way to use it. And as property investors, what we do, we take the assets in property and spread them amongst a number of properties so that we can increase our cash flow and obviously hopefully benefit from long-term growth from all the properties going up. So what they should do is go and find a totally independent mortgage broker who's got access to the full market, who can look at all the different products available and really help them decide which might be the best product for them. So there'll be a number of decisions they need to make, such as they want to fix the interest rate for a certain period of time, depending on what they think is going to happen at rates in the future. But the fundamental essence is that if they remortgage the property, they can take out a chunk of cash. Now, obviously, that's going to affect the cash flow on the one property they've got. That tidy return's going to shrink because they've got to pay for the cost of the interest. But the point is, the money they can release, they can go and buy 1, 2, maybe even 3 other investment properties. And the rent on all of those should be more than the rent on just the one. And also they've got then 3 or 4 properties, which over time, hopefully should go up in value. I would make one point as well, though. I personally wouldn't buy an apartment, wouldn't buy a new build apartment, because often they're quite expensive, they're priced at a premium. And my feeling is that generally houses have better appreciation than apartments.
Okay.
And there are things like service charges you have to pay with apartments, which will affect your cash flow as well. So that's a very general rule, and obviously in London, you know, pretty much most properties apartments. But certainly outside of London, outside the home counties and further afield, generally if you can afford it, a house seems to be a better return for me.
Okay, good advice there. Probably food for thought. And you're nodding away as well. You'd agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, as a developer, I sell new build houses and flats, but put myself in an investor's shoes, probably not the best buy, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And it's about going maybe further afield. If you're not buying to live there, you know, as long as you've got someone managing the property, it could be anywhere, couldn't it?
I think a great place to start is where you live or where you work, because you're going to have a better knowledge of it. But actually, if you're using other people to help you, you don't have to invest where you live, especially if you're not going to manage it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Right, Paul, your question. Someone says, I'm buying a piece of land to add to my garden and it's costing me £2,000. The solicitor is charging me £1,050 as I'm paying the seller's costs too. Does anyone know if there's a cheaper way without having to pay such high charges?
Cheaper solicitors' fees, yeah? So, well, if anyone knows, then please let me know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you think about it, so if they're paying the neighbours' charges as well, so that's pretty much £500 each. So I think the, you know, when it comes to buying and selling land, there's certain paperwork that needs to be done in terms of transfers. In actual fact, it's not rocket science, and it's largely, you know, form filling. But of course, you've got to know the right forms to fill, and you've got to fill them out correctly. So, you know, like all these things, you could potentially, you know, attempt to do it yourself, but you know, within the scheme of things, it's dangerous. And again, you know, £500, couple of hours lawyer's work. You know, you could shop around, but you know, within the scheme of things, I think it's probably not too bad. And at the end of the day, you do get what you pay for.
Yeah. And as you say, you can make a shortcut then and then really pay for it down the line if there's a little clause
you get it wrong, you know, it could be seriously expensive.
Bite you in the bum. I know I've got a neighbour at the moment struggling to sell their garden flat because it's only come to light now that when the solicitors get into it, it's like the garden is a shared garden. Yeah. And people are like putting offers in and then, so yeah, get a solicitor. Okay, that's my advice. I think it's time for a golden nugget, and I'm looking at you, Tony. This is where our experts give us a nice, tasty little bit of advice or knowledge. So, what have you got for us?
Okay, well, we're in a period of uncertainty where there's some real political risk, particularly if we get a change of administration. Landlords could really suffer under a Labour government. So now is the time to make sure that you're not over-leveraged, you've got really sustainable rents, that you're working in the most tax-efficient manner and have sufficient capital put by to take you over any short-term problems, like a run on the pound.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's all so uncertain at the moment, isn't it? And interest rates as well, I think, surely they're going to go up.
Yeah, look, in the late 80s, early 90s, I suffered 15% interest rates.
Yeah, exactly, when you get it in perspective.
Ouch.
I remember, when I went on the property audit, it was 7.5, and that seemed really good.
I'd live with 7.5 in the right circumstances, but a house price inflation. It's all relative to where you are. You know, but don't over leverage and don't under rent. And that way, if rates do go up, you've got a little bit of comfort there.
Yeah. Do you think this is a kind of a cautious approach, which is obviously the sensible one, but it's also leading to quite a kind of cooling off period, isn't it, in terms of buying and selling, and is the market a bit stagnant?
Yeah, but people panic very easily. You know, the great British public got a habit of buying at the top and selling at the bottom. You know, keep calm and carry on. Don't overextend yourself. Bear in mind that demand for housing exceeds supply by a margin and will continue to do so probably during our lifetimes. So if you can hold your water, buy in the right areas, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good point. It's about being able to make sure you can afford to hold the property. If prices dip down, it's not a problem as you can afford to hold them. I think rates probably will go up at some point. So having a bit of extra income in there is really useful. But also recognise that when everyone is panicking and everyone's selling, there's actually an amazing opportunity to buy. So, you know, I think the market is cooling and, you know, who knows, the market might dip. In that case, those people who know what they're doing will really do very well.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great advice. Would you concur with that?
I would. I think an important thing to remember is that there are always opportunities, whatever's happening with the market, whether it's going up or down. You just need to learn how to find them.
Okay, all right, well listen, thank you gentlemen. That's actually it for part 1 of Property Question Time, but please join us after this short break. Welcome back to Property Question Time with me, Gemma Forte, and my trio of industry experts. We have got Tony Gimple, Simon Zutshi, and Paul Higgs. Okay, Paul, I want you to put your developer cap on now, because I know you do so many things within the property world. But I'd like to know a golden nugget to do with the planning process, if possible, for future developers.
Well, one of the questions I get asked a lot is what can be done to speed up the planning process, because you know, that is one of the biggest problems in development, and in actual fact, for a long, long time, has been the biggest problem in terms of restricting housing supply. Okay, you know, the problem in this country has been the planning system.
Is that because of land that's protected in rural areas, or just generally it's so slow?
It's a couple of reasons. The crux of it is the fact that people in general don't like change. Okay, so human nature is that people are scared of change. So although now most people, you know, realise there's a massive need for housing, they still don't want it anywhere near where they live.
Right.
So as a result, planning policy, and particular central government high-level planning policy, has never really been very, very pro-development, because there's not been massive votes in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in 2012, that changed. So the new central government guidance came into force, the National Planning Policy Framework, which was actually pretty much the most pro-development policy ever since 1947, which was first Town and Country Planning Act. Okay? So, you know, central government get that the lack of housing is a massive problem, and it has all sorts of knock-on effects. So they've made high-level planning much more pro-development and much easier. However, when it filters down to local level, where the decisions are actually made, you know, council members are still thinking about local votes, and local people are still not liking change. So the two answers to speed up the planning system are to educate planning committees that actually ultimately make the planning decisions, and also to educate local people about how development doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's also to educate developers about how to develop in the right way. Okay, and at the crux of all of this, for a long, long time, there's been a sort of them and us confrontational type attitude between planners and developers. That's the thing that needs to change.
Okay, to work together a bit more.
Absolutely. And finally, and this is probably the biggest thing of all, local authority planning departments are massively under-resourced.
Right.
So if I would double local authority planners' wages, and I'm not just trying to say that to make all of my next planning applications much easier. I honestly would. You know, more people in local authority planning departments, higher wages, better people. Developers would actually be happy to pay for that if it speeded up the system.
Yeah, all the frustration that it causes when it's so slow, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Very interesting. Right, Tony, we're coming to you with a question now. It's a fairly long one, so bear with me. Everybody settle in. This person says, I've got a friend moving back from an EU country. He was born in the UK and lived here for over 30 years. His dream of living abroad's turned into a bit of a nightmare. Don't know why, interesting. But it's crushed his dreams of becoming a homeowner because, of course, the deposit that he had saved up will have to be spent on moving back, and he won't be classed as a UK resident until he's living somewhere in the UK. This person really wants to help them out. They're fortunate enough to have some cash reserves, and their current good life situation's largely thanks to this person. So, Couple of options. What should they do? Get them lodgings with a friend so that they could get UK residence and give him some deposit money, or buy him a house under their name, have him rent, and then buy the house off me after a length of time. What do you think I should do?
Probably the best course of action, get a roof over his head, get him back in UK residency, establish his mortgage credentials, see where you are at that point in time, where he wants to live. If he's still short, by all means lend him the money, let him take the mortgage in his own name and own the property. You can always take a charge on the property to protect your deposit. If you're going to buy a house in your name, you have to treat it as if you were buying a buy-to-let. Make sure the business case stacks up, and that if he doesn't pay the rent, you can replace him in due course. So probably the most sensible course for both sides is to help them get back on the property ladder, roof overhead, get them established, and then when ready, work out the financials between you.
Maybe draw up some kind of paperwork between them though, because best friends and money.
It gets pretty toxic at times. Whatever you do, it's got to be done as a business.
Yes, yeah. Okay, good advice. Sounds like this person's got really good, well-meaning, really wants to help this person, but it's a bit of a can of worms. This lucky person has inherited £250,000 for their 25th birthday. Wow. Gosh, I don't want to think what would have happened if that had been me at 25. I don't think there'd have been any sensible investment. This person says, I'm not sure whether to invest my money in a bundle of properties or invest in a project by starting up an estate agency. Interesting. So, what do you think?
So, what a great problem to have. First of
exactly.
all. So they, of course, could start a business. There are lots of franchises. It's probably better to buy into a franchise than try and start a business on your own.
But there's a lot of estate agents out there, isn't there?
And obviously, with things going online as well, is a traditional estate agent what you really want to get into? So I would suggest, do they really want to start a business and get a job, which is then, has all the hassle related to that, whereas they could take, that's quite a lot of money to invest, they could take that, buy a good number of properties, they could set up to be very passive, i.e. someone else managing it, and just enjoy a really fantastic cash flow, and then work out what they really want to do with the rest of life, instead of to have a business which may or may not succeed.
Yeah, it's quite young at 25, isn't it?
It is, and we don't know what experience they've got or not, but for most, and you see some very young entrepreneurs who do incredibly well.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person very much. Do they have a real drive to do business? Is it a passion they've got? Are they going to really stick out the problems? Because there are a lot of challenges in business, but you can do really well. So I think it's about thinking, what do they really want to achieve from it?
I'm always interested when people say I want to buy a bundle of properties with their 250,000. I assume then you're breaking that up into deposits, but there's still legal fees. There's still, how many properties can you really get?
Well, 250,000 would go quite a long way. Depends where they're based in the UK.
Mortgage you can get.
Absolutely. Well, remember when you get an investment property, it's generally based on the rental income from the property. Some lenders, most lenders will see an income from the borrower. Sometimes it's over 25,000, but there are some lenders that don't need much of an income because it's based on the property.
Right.
I'm assuming they have a job at that age. It may not be a huge amount, but might be enough to show they're employable, because sometimes employers, mortgage companies don't count the income from property. So the best thing to do is get some really good advice.
Yeah,
so
get a broker.
Get an accountant, get a mortgage broker, really trying to work out the best way to move forward. But, what a great position to be in at that age in life.
I know, fantastic. World's their oyster. And I'm glad they're thinking sensibly about it, not just having one massive, massive party.
Not just spending it on big cars and things like that, because that's really not buying an asset that is going to produce an income and go up in value is such a smart thing to do.
And actually, I'm saying all of this, I got my first flat when I was 21.
Yeah, that's wow.
And the deposit was, I think, £4,000, which I'd inherited. £4,000, I know. So I was quite sensible too, really. Maybe now I'd have the party. Maybe it's the midlife thing. Right, Paul, your question. This person says, I'm another youngster. I'm currently, compared to me, 23 years old, working full-time and living at home, with no real commitments and few regular outgoings. I'm lucky to be in a position where I have got approximately 100k in assets, which can easily be liquidated to allow me to set up. No prior experience in property development, but I have previously purchased property and had relative success carrying out minor refurbishments and managed to rent the property privately at a good yield. So, yeah. Moreover, my father's got lots of experience in the building trade and has built and renovated properties in the past. I've got some great contacts in the industry. So how do you think that I should start my portfolio?
How much money again did they have?
100,000, 100K.
Okay. So it's a few interesting points in that question. They say, like, you know, how do I start my portfolio? Okay, so portfolio would lead to investment, where as the question was about development. Development and investment are two very, very different things, okay? Yeah. Now, obviously you can develop with a view to creating an investment for yourself. So it would be important to find out firstly exactly what the people, what they're looking to do.
It sounds like sort of mentioning the fact that they've done a bit of refurbishment and a bit of renovating. It sounds like, doesn't it, the idea is to develop a property, sell it and start to create a portfolio that way.
Yeah, potentially. Or what they might be thinking about is, you know, at a much larger scale is come to be called build to rent, where you're effectively, you know, creating your own finished units, which you then refinance to hold for yourself. So a couple of short answers there. Depends where they are in the country as well. Of course, in some places, 100 grand's going to go a long, long way. If it's in London, you know,
get a garage.
It wouldn't take you very far at all. So
get a rabbit hutch, a really nice one.
Important thing is for them to establish exactly what it is, what they want to do. Importantly, as well, to remember that, yeah, there's a whole range of development. Okay, my first deal was probably something similar to what that guy can do. I bought a house, was a bit of a wreck, did it up, sold it, made a few quid. Did it again, got a bit more adventurous, bought a house, split it into flats. All of that stuff, I mean, it's sort of development. I don't really consider it development anymore at a proper large scale. But I suppose it is. If that's the sort of thing they need to do, it's important to remember that development, it's not all about building. Okay, most people, I certainly did to start with, thought that I had to become an expert in construction. I had to learn all about building. It was all about building. It's not all about building. The really clever part of development is about land. That means finding the right deals, and it means it's about planning. That means knowing how to add maximum value to every opportunity. So depending on how serious they want to be about this, they need to learn about planning. If they want to get into high-level proper development, it's all about planning. They also need to focus on finding deals that are not on the market. You don't find good deals on Rightmove.
No. Okay. Yes, I'm intrigued. In the coffee break, I'm going to be finding out where these deals are. But yes, I know what you're saying. So it's a lot of research. And also, I guess you're coming from this angle. You've done it all, you know, big developer, this person's starting out. So actually, for them, the first buy probably will feel like you're developing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a long journey.
Exactly. And the point is, I started there, literally, you know, I started with, you know, 10 grand, luckily enough, which was a long, long time ago. Yeah. Did my first deal. It is sort of development, but it's important for people to work out exactly what they want to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Brilliant stuff. Right. Nugget time. Who's got a nugget?
I've got a nugget.
Yay, Simon. And by the way, a nugget is a nice little morsel of advice. Go on.
So we've had lots of people on this particular show who seem to have inherited money. They've got cash to invest, which is great. But I think it's really important to educate yourself. You know, any idiot can go and buy a property, and many idiots do. So it's important to work out the right property in the right area at the right price.
Yeah.
And think about, what do you want to achieve? So what's your exit? Do you want to develop something or refurb it and then sell it on to make a profit, on which you're going to pay some tax? Or do you want to hold on to it, refinance it, and maybe get a residual income coming from that property? Yeah. So quite a few things to understand, to think about. And instead of doing it on your own, try and meet other people who've achieved what you want to achieve and ask them questions. And most people are fairly open. They might be a bit proud of what they've done, so they'll tell you. They'll open up. You know, watching programs like this, getting on the internet, watching webinars, reading books. Just educate yourself to really try and minimise some of the risks. Because if you don't know what you're doing, just the caveat is it is possible to lose money. But with some preparation, some research and education, you should really minimise the risks.
Okay, I think that sounds like great advice. Do your research. The thing is, it's all there, isn't it?
Yeah.
People don't go to libraries anymore, but there are libraries. There's the internet. There's so much information, property at shows like this as well. obviously the best way to go. Okay, that's it for this episode of Property Question Time. So if you would like to ask any questions at all, you can go onto our website, all the W's, property-tv.co.uk, or email us, info@property-tv.co.uk. All that remains to be said is thank you so much to my guests, Paul Higgs, Simon Zutshi, and Tony Gimple. Thank you for watching.